So look on the left-hand side. Look at that tall building with the statue on it. That is Ceres, the Roman goddess of agriculture, and she's protecting the agricultural products in Chicago. So let's take Whacker, huh? Whacker. That's what we want to do. That'll work out. That's good. There was a reason we went down that street.
There's no Walker Drive. That's the John Hancock Tower.
Yeah. You want to go straight, yeah, upper way.
PMO, Banco Montreal office.
Are we?
Ang laki.
Yeah. I think we should be able to get all the way. Should be all over. So while we're rerouting here, you know we're known as the Windy City, right?
Yes.
And there's a couple reasons. Everybody thinks it's because of the wind, and especially on the Chicago River where all the tall skyscrapers are, sort of creates a tunnel. But the real reason why we're called the Windy City is that back in 1893 we had this wonderful World's Fair, the Columbian Exposition, and we had 27 million folks from around the world come to Chicago. No airplanes in those days. They either took cruise ships across the ocean or train rides to Chicago. Well, there were other cities in the United States that wanted to have that World's Fair. New York City wanted it, Washington, D.C. wanted it, Philadelphia wanted it. The President of the United States at the time, Benjamin Harrison, he came here in 1890, and he was so impressed with Chicago because we survived that horrific Chicago fire. That's a story I'm going to tell in the afternoon when we're at the location of that fire. We survived the fire, and of course Chicago invented the skyscraper. So in the 1890s you would come to Chicago, the only city really around the world that you would see 25-story buildings. And so we had many of those, and he was so impressed, the president was, that he went back to Washington, D.C., convinced Congress that Chicago should have that World's Fair. And those other cities, they accused Chicago of having hot, windy politicians. And that, they said, is how we got the World's Fair. Well, that's not the real reason. It was because we survived the fire and we were building wonderful buildings. We're known for our architecture. But that's why we're called the Windy City. You'll find the next street will be Madison, so that's good. You'll find every kind of style of architecture in Chicago. Everything from neoclassical to mid-century modern to Beaux-Arts, contemporary buildings. We have architects from around the world coming to Chicago just to see all the wonderful architecture, and we'll see a lot of it as we drive through the city. So, and particularly after the Chicago fire, many architects came to Chicago because everything was burnt to the ground, and it was an opportunity to build new buildings. So many architectural firms stayed in Chicago, and they are designing buildings all over the world. We have many world-renowned architectural firms, companies located here in Chicago. So we're going to head down Madison to United Center. It's about 12-15 minutes away. And originally, of course, we had the Madhouse on Madison, the Chicago Stadium, and that was replaced by the United Center back in the 1990s. And the United Center physically in size is the largest sports arena in the country, but not necessarily seating the most capacity-wise. We seat about 20,000 spectators, either for the Blackhawks hockey team or the Chicago Bulls basketball team. So here's Wacker Drive, and we're going to head straight west. I don't see any runners. That's good. And everything's clearing up here. So you're going to be on about a 75-minute river cruise tomorrow, and this is the South Branch. You'll be on the North Branch. You'll be on the Main Branch. So it's just a great way to see the city. I happen to narrate for one of the boat cruise lines, and it's just a wonderful. What time's your cruise? Oh, in the morning. That's even nicer. Yep, that'll be wonderful. You get a great perspective of the buildings that you wouldn't by either walking or driving by taking that cruise. So we have 4 different boat cruise lines in Chicago. You're taking the Shoreline from Navy Pier. So we have a lot in common. My wife and I, over 50 years ago, honeymooned in Toronto.
Wow.
We lived in Buffalo at the time, and so I didn't have enough money to take her to the Caribbean, so we did a 90-mile drive to, and we stayed, oh my gosh, well, I can remember some restaurants that some of you may remember. Ports of Call, and that was there. The Walker House was a really nice restaurant. I'm sure Casa Loma is still there. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. We have been to Canada so many times. We've taken the Rocky Mountaineer train, which is just a wonderful way to see Lake Louise, Banff, and Jasper. And we stopped at a city called Kamloops.
Kamloops.
That wasn't too special, but then we finished in Vancouver. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, wait a minute. I hope no one's from Kamloops here. Oh, I'm going to be careful. Oh, my God.
Whole Foods smell.
And then we did Vancouver. Yep. But anyway, and also, I feel like we're all related, the Royal Bank of Canada was my client. So everybody, I was their real estate man here in Chicago, because they owned banks in the United States, and they owned an investment house in the United States. So we took care of all their properties, and every month I would go to the Gold Building